Hi, welcome to today's video. My name is Paul. So this week I'll be doing some watercolor landscape painting in the background if you like, but I wanted to talk this week more about the paper. So you can see the paper I'm going to be using. It's by this German company Hahnemühle or Hahnemühle or Hahnemühle or whatever way you want to pronounce it. I don't speak German, so I'm not sure. I'm going to go with Hahnemühle. This one, they have different series of paper. This one is the Harmony series. It's not the paper that I usually use. Usually I would use their anniversary series, and usually I use a cold press paper. This one is a hot press paper. Now the Harmony series, you can get it in hot pressed and cold press, but this particular one is the hot press paper. So first thing to consider then is, what's the difference between hot press and cold press papers? If you're new to watercolor, which one do you get? What's the difference? I would advise experimenting. Try both and see what works best for you. Don't just go by what somebody on the internet told you to do. So try them both, see what works for you. Different styles work better on some papers and not on others, etc., etc. But there is a difference. So the cold pressed paper has a more textured surface. Hot pressed paper is a very shiny surface. Imagine in the kitchen, marble or a steel countertop, something like that. It's very hard, it's very tight, it's very water resistant. That's kind of your hot press paper. When you put the wet paint onto the hot press paper, maybe you saw it at the beginning, it sort of sits there in puddles, little puddles for a while. This paper is less absorbent. Cold press paper has a more textured surface, a looser surface, a rougher surface, and it is a more absorbent surface. So when you put the wet paint onto the cold press paper, it does start to sink into the paper a little bit more quickly. For different styles, that does make a difference. I can only imagine, because I don't use watercolor in the traditional classical, in inverted commas, correct way, proper way. I do it my own way. So, but if you're doing a more classical watercolor approach with washes, then I imagine a cold press paper is much easier to use. If you're using watercolor like me, it doesn't make a huge difference, to be honest. The other thing I would say about this paper, and this is true of this Harmony series, whether cold pressed or hot pressed, is it's externally sized. Now a lot of watercolor paper is internally sized. Again, in plain English, what does that mean? So the sizing is nothing to do with size. I know it's confusing, but it has nothing to do with size as in inches and centimeters and things like that. The sizing is a kind of glue that they add to the paper just to strengthen it. And a lot of papers, they add this glue during the manufacturing process. While the paper is still a gloopy mess of water and dissolved fibers, they add the glue, and then they create the sheets of paper, dry them out, etc. So the glue is actually inside the paper. The externally sized paper, they make the paper, they put it into the sheets, I guess they dry it, and then they apply the glue to the surface of the paper. So it's externally sized. In practical terms, what difference does it make? Again, for me, not a huge difference, but it might for some people. The externally sized paper is again slightly less absorbent. So the pigments, the little pigments of color, blue or green or whatever it is, they sit closer to the surface with an externally sized paper. Whereas with the internally sized paper, they sort of sink into the paper a little bit. So for some people find that the internally sized papers, the color fades a little bit compared to when you first apply it to the paper and when it dries, because some of that pigment is sinking into the fibers a little bit deeper. I use such bright colors anyway that it doesn't make a huge difference to me, but for some people it might. So it's another thing to consider. The third thing to consider with these papers is, what's the paper made of? These Harmony series is cellulose paper, which is not what I would normally use. Usually I use 100% cotton watercolor paper. It doesn't buckle as much. The cellulose paper is a bit more prone to buckling, especially if you use lots of water. This particular Harmony series, I found it does buckle, but not a huge amount, so I can live with it. It's not too bad. But those are the three things I would consider when you're buying watercolor paper. Is it hot pressed? Is it cold pressed? Is it internally sized or externally sized? And what's it made of? Cellulose, as most papers are, drawing papers for example, or is it 100% cotton, which traditionally a lot of watercolor paper is cotton paper. So, okay, that's a lot of information. When you're getting started, you're saying, okay, but I still don't know what kind of paper to buy. I would get a few different kinds. So I would get cold press paper, a hot press paper, an internally sized, an externally sized, and maybe try cotton paper or cellulose paper. Just try a few different papers, because you have your own way of using watercolor paint, and I can't tell you get this paper or get that paper, because my style is my style, and the way I use watercolor paint is probably not the way that you would use it. So you have to experiment, you have to try these things. But now you have a bit of information. Hopefully it's not too confusing, but you've got something to get started. Just experiment, try the different types of paper and see which ones work for you and your particular way of using watercolor paint. If you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching and listening, and hopefully see you again in next week's video.